everyone. Welcome back to the Charter Podcast, brought to you by St. Xavier University. I am your host, Ruthie 𝗵𝗶𝗟𝗀𝗀, back with the boys, 𝗪𝗪 𝗵𝗂 and Clay Harbor, but we have a special guest today. We are so excited, especially on this day of all days, to welcome in Matt Verderame of Sports Illustrated, national NFL writer. Matt, listen, we know you're a national guy. We know you cover all the teams, but you have a special sort of place in your heart for the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you make of the news of the day? And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that we had scheduled Matt on to just come on and talk about free agency, maybe a little combine. Sure enough, happens to be a massive news day for not only the Chicago Bears, but really for the NFL. So we're going to get into all of it with you, Matt, but want to get your perspective on really the headliner for the Bears today. Joe Thuney, 4-time Super Bowl champ, All-Pro, 2-time All-Pro. This is one of the best to do it maybe ever. Joe Thuney is now a Chicago Bear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bears really remade their offensive line here in the last couple of days between Thuney and Jonah Jackson. I think they were probably right to do it in the sense, if you look at the market, there weren't a lot of great options. You know, Will Fries is a guy maybe from the Colts you looked at and said, okay, maybe, but he's coming off a big injury. Look, Thuney, as you mentioned, I mean, he's a multiple-time All-Pro. He is a borderline Hall of Fame player. He's 32. He'll be 33 this upcoming season, but he's shown no signs of slowing down. For those who maybe are unaware, he played left tackle for the Chiefs in the playoffs when they needed him to, when they were missing guys. You know, DJ Humphries went down. Wanya Morris was ineffective. He played left tackle in a pinch and didn't give up a pressure in the AFC Championship game. I mean, this guy, he can play just about any position on the line. Of course, the Bears will be the left guard. It's a home run. I mean, yeah, it's a 4th-round pick in the future. Fine. So what? If he plays well and they extend him, as I expect that they will, you're looking at giving real legitimate protection and veteran savvy up front to Caleb Williams, which he didn't have last year. So I think that's huge. Look, Ben Johnson came from a Detroit Lions team that has a great offensive line. This is a big part of this. Like, they need an offensive line that can function at a very high level to run that offense the way he wants to. And this has been a big part of that.
Now, Matt, you spoke a lot about Thuney, but of course, the day before, they bring in Jonah Jackson as well, who brings in some more versatility, played center, has played a little bit of right guard, but also played a lot of left guard. So, two-parter, just how much do these two moves, when you pair Jonah Jackson and Thuney together, elevate the offensive line? And then what do you do with Jonah Jackson and Thuney? Because you mentioned, all right, Thuney played left tackle, but he's really, really good at left guard, and same thing, Jonah Jackson, better at left guard.
I would put Jonah Jackson on right guard, and I would leave Thuney where he is. Like, Jonah Jackson is a good football player, a really good football player, a Pro Bowler. He's not Joe Thuney. Like, I would not mess with Joe Thuney. You plug him in at left guard, and he's a Pro Bowler. He's probably an All-Pro. Just leave it alone. I'd put Jonah Jackson at right guard, and then start thinking about, okay, are you good with the rest of the line as it is? Do you still feel like you need more upgrades to it? But look, make no mistake, I mean, Jackson was available because the Rams were in a little bit of a crunch. They've got a lot of young players going to have to pay the next few years. That's why Cooper Kupp, well, one of the few reasons why Cooper Kupp's on the block. They're kind of resetting this thing a little bit with the Rams in terms of their cap numbers and where they want guys. And Jackson's a player who just last year, look, he wasn't healthy. He played 5 games. And so they felt like maybe they could move off of him and get a little younger and a little cheaper. But if you're the Bears, you have all this cap space anyway. And these are good players. And guys age well typically at interior offensive line anyway, more so than they do at other positions. The Bears have to spend money this year no matter what. You don't want to be stuck spending it in free agency where there's really not a lot of great options. It is not a strong free agency class. So I give the Bears credit for spending a couple of day 3 picks to get a couple of very good players.
You know, Matt, let's take a look at the Chiefs side of this. What sense does it make for the Chiefs, who obviously struggled as far as an offensive line unit in the Super Bowl, to give away one of their best offensive linemen for a draft pick? Is it just basically as simple as we had to sign Trey Smith with this franchise tag, so we needed to get some extra money? Or is there some layers to this? Do they think maybe the old Bill Belichick adage, it's better to get rid of a player 1 year too soon than too late? So what do you think from the Chiefs' perspective? Because Bears fans, a lot of them are thinking this is too good to be true.
No, I think the Bears are just in a really good position to make it happen. But for the Chiefs, look, it's a couple of things. To your point, when they tagged Trey Smith, they were not going to extend Joe Thuney. That they couldn't, because Trey Smith is going to be the highest paid guard in the NFL by the time this thing's said and done. I mean, they're probably going to pay him around $23-24 million a year. They were not going to then also extend Thuney for $20 million a year. They just made Creed Humphrey the highest paid center in the NFL. So at some point, you just run out of financial bullets. You can't keep them all. And they love Joe Thuney. I had somebody text me from the building today saying, "Look, we can't say enough nice things about him. We love him to death. It's just he's going to be 33. Trey Smith is going to be 26." And we had to kind of make a choice, and we're going to, we're more comfortable with the next 5 years of Trey Smith, which obviously makes sense. But look, make no mistake, it opens up a whole now left guard for the Chiefs. 𝗻𝗄liche𝗬𝗓, who they drafted in the second round out of BYU, he played tackle, he played guard. He was atrocious last year as a tackle. He played in week 18 as a guard. He was better. He's probably going to be their day one left guard for the Chiefs. I mean, they're going to turn over to him, get cheap there, and then I think they're going to make a big run at left tackle here, whether that's Ronnie Stanley or Cam Robinson or trading up in the draft. I think that's going to be the big part of their offseason. But Trey Smith was the guy they felt like they needed to keep above all else. And so Thuney, once that happened, was never going to get an extension. I think they felt like, let's get something for him rather than just let him walk in free agency.
I'm so curious about what this means for what the Bears do at number 10 overall, right? Because it felt like all attention was on offensive linemen, and, Will Campbell was sort of, I think, maybe the consensus, if he's there at 10, that's an interesting move regardless of the arm length. You figure out what position he plays later. Now, does it feel like the Bears have more flexibility with that 10th overall pick? And does this give you any sort of inclination that maybe they fell in love with somebody that's not an offensive lineman, so they felt like they had to go get offensive linemen in free agency? Obviously, here I am making a lot of conspiracy theories in my head, but I'm just curious about your thoughts there, Matt.
I think look, when you fill needs early in the offseason, it gives you more optionality as you go on, right? I mean, that's obvious. But I think being in Indianapolis and talking to people around the league at bars and restaurants, wherever else, waiting for Ubers in Indy, there's a sense that this draft is very defensive minded, that this is a much better defensive draft than an offensive draft. And so if you're the Bears, maybe you're sitting there and going, you know what, let's add a pass rusher. Let's go get a guy that pairs with a Montez Sweat. Let's go, maybe it's even a guy who pairs with a Gervin Dexter inside. You go get somebody who you feel like, you know what, this is a loaded D-tackle class. Maybe you go get one of those guys. Maybe you say, hey, you know what? Can never have enough edge rush. Maybe this is a draft where you go, hey, Jalen Johnson's our number one shutdown corner all day, no doubt about it. Maybe we get another corner to go with him. And we add to that defense. We add to that secondary. Because if you're Ben Johnson, I think you're sitting there going, okay, I like Caleb Williams. I like Rome Odunze. Right? I love DJ Moore. Cole Kmet's a good tight end. We just fixed at least 40% of our offensive line. They could fix more of it in the meantime between now and the draft. Yeah, I think it gives you the option to go, you know what, I feel good about the offense, or at least I feel a hell of a lot better. Let's add to this defense in a meaningful way, because I think a lot of teams in this draft, that's going to be the strategy. It's going to be let's get more edge rushers, more D tackles, more corners, a lot of linebackers in this draft. I mean, that's where the strength of it is. And so I think Chicago, maybe there's an opportunity at 10 to grab a guy now that they wouldn't have been able to had they not made a couple of these moves.
To that note, I'm just going to do one quick follow-up here. Is it still too soon to say that if Ashton Genty's there, they should avoid a skill position player?
Listen, I think Ashton Jeanty, for the guy almost had 3,000 yards rushing. And I get it's Boise State, but it's Boise State. It's not like he did it at Lackawanna High School. He still did it. Listen, Ben Johnson was part of an offense that drafted a running back very high not that long ago, and nobody's sitting here complaining about the fact that the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs, I believe it was 12th. So if you're the Bears and Ashton Jeanty's sitting there, maybe. I don't think you can rule it out. This is going to be a team that is going to be very, and I hate this term, but I think it applies here, very multiple offensively. That's what Ben Johnson wants to do. Very balanced, very unpredictable. And when you look at the running back situation, look, Jeanty would help a lot of teams. I think he would help Chicago. I don't think you can rule it out. I don't at all. And I will say, too, this is a draft, though, where Jeanty's certainly the cream of the crop at running back. There are a lot of running backs in this class. Some people will tell you inside the league, this is
Marion Hampton, man. Omarion
Hampton's
Hampton.
great out of UNC. You know, I like the kid out of Ohio State, Travion Henderson. There's a lot of guys. I mean, there's a lot of guys in this class. There's going to be probably 25 running backs get drafted in this class. There's a lot.
You mentioned Ben Johnson and, you know, fitting this in Ben Johnson's image. He said when he took this job that basically the year prior, he viewed the Bears as a sleeping giant. And then, you know, Caleb Williams is such this intriguing prospect. But then obviously it was a poor season. So I'm just curious from that national perspective, do you get the sense that the Bears are kind of viewed as a sleeping giant that, hey, if they just figure out the trenches, they could be a real contender? Or is it more that these guys got a lot of work to do before they make hay and make strides in this NFC North? It's a pretty packed division.
I think two things can be true at once. Like, it's a loaded division. So it's going to be hard to crack that group, right? I mean, Minnesota, there's upheaval there at quarterback because I believe McCarthy's going to be the starter day one. I don't think Darnold's coming back. The Packers feel like they've kind of found their level as like what they are right now, like a 10-11 win team. And then the Lions obviously are fantastic. So you got to be able to crack through that a little bit, right? I mean, that's the challenge that the Bears have. That being said, I do think people look at the Bears nationally and go, look, Caleb Williams had 20 touchdowns and 6 picks and had nobody protecting him. And they got to 68 sacks. You look around the rest of the roster and you're like, there's talent. Like, it's not like this team doesn't have talent. And they just added 2 really nice pieces before we've even gotten a free agency. So, no, I think there is a perception that the Bears can be a good team right away. I mean, this is just my own personal belief, but I'm a big believer. And sometimes things just turn on little moments in games and in seasons. The Bears are a whisker away from being 4-2 and coming out of Washington feeling really, really good. And then that play happened. And it just kind of it derailed them. I mean, not kind of, it did. It derailed them completely. I think sometimes, you know, that stuff, how different is the season if that ball gets knocked down? I don't know. I'm not saying they win the Super Bowl, but maybe they win 8 or 9 games and they're a lot different. So, no, I think the Bears are you know, fairly close to being a playoff team. And I thought Ben Johnson was a home run hire. I think he was the best hire of the offseason.
Yeah, Matt. So there was a lot of news today, a lot of releases, and a trade request at the wide receiver position. And I'm talking Tyler Lockett got released from the Seahawks, longtime Seahawk. Christian Kirk, slot receiver, got released from my former team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then DK Metcalf just requested a trade and received permission to go look for a trade for him and his agent. Is there anyone in the NFC North, I mean, maybe possibly Chicago, you could see these receivers landing with? If not Chicago, then let's just expand a little bit to the NFC North.
I think Lockett, to me at this point, is probably a one-year guy with incentives. I mean, he's an older player. He's had a great career, but he's an older player. He's in his 30s. Metcalf is fascinating. Like, he's got a decent cap hit this year. He's going to get an extension. He'll be 29 when that extension kicks in. Like, who gives him that contract? You know, there are a lot of teams that are contending teams, as he'd like to go to, that they need a guy like DK. I mean, for a lot of teams do, but like that would love a guy like DK Metcalf. Whether you're talking about a team like Kansas City, we just talked about, whether we're talking about Buffalo, you know, whether you want to look at the NFC, I mean, the Packers, who it feels like have a million receivers and also have none. Like, they need a number one receiver on the team, right? Like, you look around, there's a lot of them. I mean, there's a ton of teams out there that you'd go, yeah, you know, they're a reasonable contender. You know, what if you know, the Cowboys came calling, right? I mean, they just opened up a ton of space. Would they pair him with CeeDee Lamb? Like, Lamb plays in the slot a lot anyway. Maybe you do that. There's so many teams. The question becomes, if you're Seattle, how long are you willing to wait out a bidding war here? Like, are you willing to wait this thing out for a couple weeks, a month, right before the draft? Like, how far will you go, and what will you get? My guess would be a second-round pick, maybe a late first would be something like that for Metcalf, because you do have to also pay him. But, man, yeah, I mean, and then Christian Kirk, I think, is a lot like Lockett. I think he's another, you know, 1 year, you know, maybe it's a 2-year deal that's like really a 1-year deal with a team option. But he still is very productive when he's healthy.
I'm curious, Matt, obviously coming off the combine where I feel like you kind of get a feel for the rest of the league, what other people are saying, what other teams are saying. What's sort of the national perspective on the Ben Johnson hire and the Caleb Williams pairing? Like, where is the sort of, what's the narrative right now about those two and what needs to happen for this team to be successful? Because I think like here in Chicago, it really feels like the word is still out on Caleb Williams, right? I think obviously people see the special, they see everything he can do, but now it's all about reining it in and figuring out how he can be consistent and successful behind a competent offensive line, right? Which I think we're all seeing was clearly the priority. So I'm just curious if you had any conversations or talked to people. What are you thinking about where the Bears stand now with Ben Johnson at the helm?
I think Ben Johnson's been the guy that everybody's wanted to hire for a couple of years now. And last year, he kind of took his name out of consideration, said he was going to go back to the Lions. He had unfinished business. This year, obviously, it didn't work out again for the Lions. A lot of injuries, big upset, and he leaves. I think most people feel like in this hiring cycle, the two teams that really you couldn't have asked any more of were the Bears and the Patriots. The Patriots got their guy in Mike Vrabel. The Bears got their guy in Ben Johnson. Now, it doesn't mean that Aaron Glenn won't be great with the Jets or Pete Carroll won't work out, but like, I think with other teams, there's this thought of like, look, the Jaguars are, Liam Cohen, good, I think a very good offensive mind, but that is an organization in somewhat of turmoil, like with Trent Baalke and how long it took to move off of Trent Baalke. The Jets, they're the Jets. Until proven otherwise, they remain the Jets. I think it's how most people in the league feel. The Raiders, Carroll brings immediate respectability to them, but there is the open question. Like, look, he's 73 years old. Like, how long is he going to be there and running that show and what happens? And is there a succession plan? With the Bears, they got the guy that everybody's wanted for years. Like, they brought in the guy, and you're pairing him with Caleb Williams, who I think most people look at and feel like, okay, look, he was overshadowed last year by Jaden Daniels, who went out and had an unbelievable year. It took the Commanders to the NFC title game. But I don't think anybody nationally, at least it's, in my opinion, is reputable, is looking at Caleb Williams and thinks he can't play. I mean, if you watch Caleb Williams, he can play. He had some games last year you looked at him and went, man, that's everything you want in your quarterback. But look, he's got to improve some things. He's got to get rid of the ball a little faster. He's got to go through his reads a little faster. And guess what? That's just about every rookie in the NFL. Like that's reality. I think there's this weird thing that everybody expects these rookie quarterbacks to just come in and be unbelievable the second they step into the league. Like that doesn't happen. You look at a guy like Mahomes. Mahomes he sat all year as a rookie. And then I think it was like 2 or 3 years into his career, he did the shop on HBO. He did an episode of it and literally said in the episode, he's like, yeah, I don't really know how to read defenses. And like, it was an MVP at that point. But like, it took him 3 or 4 years. Like, he didn't know. He was a guy just look and throw it. I don't know. Like, it takes time. It takes time. And I think having an offensive-minded head coach to pair with Caleb Williams, I think that'll really help.
Clay, you got anything else?
No, man, I'm good. Who is your biggest stud from the combine before we let you go here, Matt, since we're just getting out of the combine land? I know you're down in Indy.
I think a couple guys, I mean, Shamar Stewart, D lineman out of Texas A&M, I thought had a really strong combine. He showed up. I think, it's harder and harder every year because like a lot of the top guys don't do anything. They don't throw, they don't run. Like, it's kind of obviously Membo, the tackle out of Missouri. My God, I mean, the guy was booking it. He's running like a 4.9 at 300 and whatever pounds. I can't
loudest 40-yard dash I've ever heard.
When I was in high school, I was 15 years old. I weighed 190 pounds, and I ran a 4.9. I was thrilled to death. And the guy's running a 4.9, 300 and some odd pounds, which is why he's in the NFL. I'm not. But look, among about 8,000 other reasons. But no, I think those are the guys, like offense and defense, I look at and say, those are two of the guys who probably rose up some boards a little bit.
That's good. Two of the guys we mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, I got one more for you, Matt, too. What happens with the number 1 overall pick?
I think if the Titans could trade out of it, they would. I think they'd move back. Like Mike Borgonzi, their new GM, he talked a lot about the fact, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said their offensive line is not good. And so, yeah, you're right. It's not good. And it's really not good because they've used a lot of high picks recently on it. 𝗪cie last year, Skoronski out of Northwestern, who they moved from tackle to guard. That kind has been hit and miss. They signed Lloyd Cushenberry last year. But anyway, the point is, I think if they could, they would trade back and maybe they would take a 𝗵𝗶𝗶, out of Mizzou, or they take a Will Campbell, out of LSU, although the arm line thing might hurt him a little. If they stay at one, I feel like they're going to take 𝗵𝗀𝘀. And that, look, we're months away. That could change, but they know they need a quarterback, but I think they look at it like we need other stuff first. And they talked about wanting more top 100 picks. They don't have their third round pick this year. They traded it to the Chiefs for 𝗵𝗂𝗍. So I think they would like to accumulate more picks in this draft. And by the way, I think that's going to be a theme in this draft. A lot of teams are going to want to trade back. They're going to want more picks rather than – I don't think it's a class. You're like, oh, there's 20 guys who are awesome, and then it falls off. I think it's more like there are 5 guys maybe who are awesome. And then it's like from picks 20 to 70, I'd rather have 4 picks and just take my swings than, trade up for one specific guy.
Interesting. That's great stuff. Best quarterback?
Cam Ward.
Cam Ward. Yeah. I think we're all in the Cam Ward train here on this podcast. All right. I love it. I guess that sort of had me thinking, because we had a discussion on our show the other day. Where's Aaron Rodgers go?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the Giants and Raiders both showed how desperate they are for quarterbacks by going after a veteran guy in Stafford. Look, I think Darnold to the Raiders makes a lot of sense. So I'll say Rodgers maybe to the Giants, if not there, Tennessee. I believe there's a home in Tennessee. So that would make some sense there. If the Giants feel like they can get one of the rookies at 3, I think they might just go that route. But if not, then maybe they go. The only thing that holds me back on that one is like the Mara family is a very conservative, like very tightly wound family. They just watched this whole thing play out in their stadium with Rodgers. You're going to do that again in your uniform now at 42 years old? Like, I guess when I really worked through it in my head, I'll say the Titans. But I think there's like 2 or 3 teams that are legitimately in play.
Aaron Rodgers and Abdul Carter. That doesn't sound so bad.
You could do worse. I mean, you could do not having Abdul Carter and having Will Levis, which is what this season looked like. So yeah, I mean, Rodgers and Carter would certainly be an improvement over that for sure.
Matt Verderame of Sports Illustrated, thank you so much for joining us. This was a blast. You're obviously full of knowledge. We so appreciate you taking some time to be with us.
Anytime. Happy to do it.
Great stuff from Matt there, guys. Obviously, really interesting to hear the national perspective of what's going on, not only with the Bears, but around the league. And I think it's going to be a really fascinating draft. Just talking to Matt, like that was really my biggest takeaway. I also obviously love to hear that there's a lot of positivity around the Bears nationally, because I think we get caught up in the whole like Bears offseason hype every single year, just diving headfirst into the hype, which, listen, it's fun. Why not? But it's cool to hear that there's a lot of positivity around the Ben Johnson-Caleb Williams pairing.
Absolutely, especially when you hear what he has to say about the Jets, right? You could very easily say the Bears are the Bears until proven otherwise. But he didn't. He said, you know what? There's a lot of talent here. You look at Caleb Williams, and yeah, things didn't go their way, but there's a quarterback there. And he was overshadowed by Jaden Daniels, but there's something to work with. And then when you talk about the Jets are the Jets until proven otherwise. So that difference to me also indicates like, okay, yes, we are in a little Chicago Bears hype bubble because it's all we talk about. It's all we see. But at least from the outside perspective, there is some belief in what the Bears got cooking here with Ryan Poles as well.
The chef is cooking. One of the things I thought was interesting from Matt is he's obviously a national writer for Sports Illustrated, but he also has a Kansas City Chiefs podcast that is a big Kansas City Chiefs podcast. Big insider there for us to get there. Let me do not disturb there. Sorry about that, guys. And for me to just get his perspective of the Chiefs angle of this thing, because I was worried, like, okay, why, if something looks too good to be true, a lot of times it is, getting his perspective. Listen, Joe Thuney's a great player. Joe Thuney's durable. Joe Thuney is going to be 33, but what it came down to is, he said it, guards do age well, but they had to decide between Trey Smith and Joe Thuney, and you can't blame them for taking the long-term approach with Trey Smith. Obviously, with Patrick Mahomes having this window open for as long as it's going to be, you don't have to have this win now type vibe going with the Chiefs. So you're kind of seeing why the Chiefs were open to doing this deal. And me, it's like, okay, why would the Chiefs give away for a next year's 4th round pick, Joe Thuney? But it makes sense hearing from Matt. Like, listen, they got to go after a left tackle. They needed money to pay Trey Smith. It's nothing about Joe Thuney. This was all because the Chiefs needed money. They loved Joe Thuney. He talked to someone in the building, loved Joe Thuney, but it was just time because of the money situation.
Right.
And furthermore, he still believes he's like an all-pro, Pro Bowl guard. You know, he still thinks, you put him back at left guard, he's still Joe Thuney, right? The left tackle thing, it was a Band-Aid for a while. We talked about it a lot leading up to the Super Bowl, and then it got exposed in the Super Bowl. You put him back in his position, and I think he's dead on there, where you have Joe Thuney play left, and then you have Jonah Jackson play on the right side. You have Jonah Jackson play a little bit out of position. You know, it's also encouraging to hear that he thinks, he's like, yeah, you put him in there, it's set and forget, he's going to be great.
I also know Clay was roommates with Joe Thuney for a cup of tea when he was in New England. He told that story on the radio today. I actually got a text from a former New England player that I covered that texted me, I'm so jealous you guys got Joe back, like, or that you guys have Joe now. Cause like they were trying, you know, everyone in New England just adores that man. He had an unbelievable streak of consecutive snaps, and I think he's played every single snap at least the last 2 years. Clay, correct me if I'm wrong there. Yeah. So I think there's just like so much positivity around this person, regardless of his age. And again, someone who's super intelligent, super smart, durable, brings all the traits that I think the Bears need, especially just honestly when it comes to, like, we've talked about it so much, but just leadership for that group. Like, you just need someone to take control of that group and set the tone. And they don't really have anyone that's been able to do that the last 2-3 years. So this is really exciting. And I think I'm still a little uneasy about the Jonah Jackson situation because he's primarily a left guard. You're paying him $17 million next year to then move his position or to be a backup. Like, it just, I don't really understand where he fits in yet, but I'm sure we'll get some clarity on that, you know, in the weeks and months to come. Just a little puzzling there for me. But again, what also feels really exciting about all these moves is that it does provide you more flexibility. I think I still stand with, you got to go at this point. If you're not drafting an offensive lineman at 10, you should go D-line or edge rusher. That's really where I stand there. I would avoid the skill position, although I know it will be tempting for, you know, Ryan Poles, who loves to draft skill position players in the top 10, as he did last year.
Yeah, I agree. No, one thing that I think we got to look at as well, Ruthie, you named so many things with the leadership, just the knowing how to pick up an offense, the study habits, how you're supposed to have a routine, the weight room. He's a leader. Joe Thuney is a guy that leads by example. He's not the rah-rah, win one for the Gipper, let's go out there and bang his head off the wall. But he's a guy that leads by example and you can follow. And the other thing is, this guy knows how to win. And I'm not talking about have 9-win seasons, 10-win seasons. This guy's been to 6 Super Bowls in his 9 years of NFL career playing existence. 6 Super Bowls. He's won 4. This guy's played for Bill Belichick. He's played for Andy Reid, 2 of the best coaches. If there's a guy you want to bring in, you talk about culture and setting culture, this is the perfect guy. When I was his roommate, this guy's bringing his homework home. He's studying the playbook. He was a 3rd-round draft pick that starts on a year the Patriots ended up winning the Super Bowl, the 28-3 year, started the entire year as a rookie with Tom Brady. And trust me, that offense is not easy to learn. At that point, I was a 7-year NFL veteran, and I'm struggling, my head's spinning. Joe Thuney walks in the building. He picks up that offense like that. We're back at home quizzing each other. I'm like, how do you know this stuff better than I do? You're a rookie coming from NC State. So that's the type of guy they're getting. And there's one other stat that I thought was really cool about both Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney, and take it for what it's worth, but just doing some research on ESPN, I thought this was interesting. 94 players had at least 60 pass block plays with a win or a loss at guard last season. Jackson, 98.5, and 𝗬𝗎, 98.2, had the two highest pass block win rates at guard in the entire NFL. Obviously,
Wow.
Jackson only played a few games, but 𝗬𝗎, when he was at guard, got the job done. ESPN's pass block win rate, some people wonder, what does that even mean? But it's just something to go off of. These two guys are playing at high levels. They're really good pass protectors, and I think that's exactly what Poles needed and what they wanted. And I think that when you hear Poles say, I think the clearer the vision, the more aggressive you can be, this points to exactly that. They had a clear vision. They went after two guys they both wanted, and they got them.
That's just a great head start. I mean, again, kind of echoing what Matt said, the Bears had and still have a lot of work to do on that offensive line, right? We've talked about all the holes. Free agency hasn't even opened up, and they've gotten this great head start because of the resources that they had. They had the draft capital. They had the cap space. They are deploying that stuff and filling these holes. So now that, now they can focus more on center. If they want to upgrade at tackle, they can go ahead and do that. If they want to focus in on the defensive line, they can go ahead and do that. And I also think it affords them, when the draft rolls around, if they continue to address these holes and get a head start, now you can take the best player on your board, which is also so important. You're not fitting needs in because we absolutely have to have this guy here. You can start drafting best player available, which is so important. So honestly, winning in the offseason is not the same as winning in the regular season. And the Bears have done a lot of winning in the offseason, and, the wins in the regular season are yet to come. So grain of salt, but it's hard to not love these two moves.
Go get Drew Dahlman and I'm good. Got to prioritize center now. That's next. And I think that's a position that we haven't seen Ryan Poles prioritize in the last 3 years or 2 years, 3 years, 3 years. So go get one and get a good one and pay him whatever he wants and then do whatever you want in the draft. And I won't be mad. Yes. 𝗂𝗏, did you raise your hand?
I raised my hand. Just wanted to say one more thing. The Bears just tendered Bill Murray, the offensive lineman. So that was something I wanted to get your guys' take on. Obviously, they saw something in Murray. He got injured last year. So yeah, they must like him, right?
They love this guy. I've heard nothing but positive things about Bill Murray, and I think it just provides them that depth security, someone that can be versatile, right, Alex?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to need 10 offensive linemen. Do I expect Bill Murray to start? No, but you need to fill out that entire room. As Ruthie said, the Bears really like him. He got some playing time. There was some good, there was some bad, but there's obviously something to work with there. I think what we're seeing with these moves, with Bill Murray getting tendered, I think pretty confidently we can say it's the end of Tevin Jenkins' tenure in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to indicate that they are ready to move on from him. Especially you have two left guards, one might be a right guard. Now you bring in Bill Murray, who's another interior lineman. So that's the only other footnote I would think of there.
Yeah, and I think it just brings me back to when Ben Johnson did say, we need 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 10 guys of depth. And I think that's just an addition of depth. They saw something in Bill Murray in his limited snaps last year. I think he played like 42 snaps, but when he did get in, he played well. So excited to see what he can do this offseason, maybe create some competition there at some of the interior line.
Great stuff, guys. Alex Shapiro, 𝗂𝗏, you guys are the best. Again, shout out to Matt Verderame for joining us from Sports Illustrated. Great stuff from him today as well. That is going to do it for this edition of the Charter Podcast, brought to you by St. Xavier University. We will see you next week with probably a lot more news to discuss. Have a great weekend, everyone.